Hello and welcome to Gettable, AFL.com.au's home of trade, draft, free agency and contract news. We are here thanks to Google Pixel. It's great to have our friends at Google Pixel on board for season 2024. What a season it's been, and there's still plenty more still to come. I'm Riley Beveridge, this is Cal Twomey. Cal, we are now 2 weeks away from the national draft. We can't wait for that. We've got a massive episode as we preview what's to come.
Can't wait for the draft. 2 weeks to go. It's amazing that it's here. And you speak to the draftees and clubs and recruiters, it's like, well, it's just the countdown period now. And we're in countdown period as well. So looking forward to working it all out, where they will fit, where they will go, what the clubs are up to. There's lots of machinations on board. I usually say it takes until after Melbourne Cup weekend for the best details to start to emerge around who's going where and what the clubs are trying to do. So hopefully over the next week or so that starts to emerge. But there is a little bit out there, and we'll get to that today. Yeah,
we certainly will. And I reckon one way to get to that is with a segment we haven't done for a while. It's Quick Fix. There's nothing that's a quick fix about the draft. This is all about long-term fixes when you go to the draft. But yeah. Cal, we're just going to rattle through some questions with draft implications and trade and contract implications down the track here. So, send up Saints. Can St Kilda land the draft haul to supercharge its rebuild?
Well, to some degree, they are at the mercy of the clubs ahead of them, which is always going to be the case when you're back at picks 7 and 8.
Yep.
It's funny how those wins at the end of the season hurt their draft stocks in the end. They won 5 of their last 6 games. A couple of really big wins at the end pushed them back. Look, if Alex Taru comes into that top group of draftees, and I'm saying if he's a top 6 pick, then it probably does enhance, or it definitely enhances the chances of a gun midfielder getting through to St Kilda's spot. So there is a world where Sid Draper gets there. There's a world where Harvey Langford gets there. I think there's more worlds where Josh Smiley is on the table there. And Josh Smiley, for what St Kilda would be looking for in terms of midfielders, he's going to have to be considered. Here's a chance he's already gone as well. Richmond, I think, is probably his starting point at pick 6. And then onwards, the clubs will look at him really closely. But there's a world where he does get there, no doubt about that. And look, he's dominant. And his form at the start of this season was particularly good. And then the championships, he did some pretty good things as well. Murphy Reid is another midfielder who would have to be in the mix, given what he can do and what he performed like throughout the whole season. An MVP for Vic Metro at the Carnival, at the Under-18 Championships there for the winning team. He was outstanding throughout that time, and also kicked a lot of goals for the Sandringham Dragons as a half-forward midfield option. So I think he's probably likely to be on the board still at that point. Maybe that's the starting point for when he comes in. Look at some of his work with his hands there. The best handballer in the draft. Toby Travaglia, I think, will be in the mix for them. Do they go for a tall themselves to join up with the midfielder with one of their picks in Harry Armstrong? So I think that they're in a really good spot to take a good couple of options. And Philippo, Wilson, Owens, Windhager, 2 more top 10 picks this year. They should give them a pretty good platform of youth.
And we know we've got a couple of academy players coming in later, a father-son, Elwood Peckett, who they've nominated as well. Draft mystery, who takes the shot on Taj Houghton? Because he looked like he could have been right in that mix of early players this year until that ACL injury ruined his campaign.
Yeah, this is a potential boom for the club that does take Taj Houghton. I'm a huge fan of Taj Houghton based on what we saw at the start of this season, but also last year as a bottom major, where he was playing mainly as a half-forward. This year we saw him play in the midfield and dominate games. The club that takes him will do so knowing that he probably won't be playing until the second half of next season. So that's coming off that ACL injury. Houghton still has so many admirers. I think he's likely to come into contention around that sort of pick 15 onwards. The Western Bulldogs could be in the frame for him at pick 17. Sydney, I think, will also look with its 2 first-round picks, 19, 22. He's the type of player that I think Richmond, given they have 8 first-round picks, he's someone that you can almost bring in, bank, let him take a little bit further down the line to develop. So I think all of those clubs would have to be right in the mix for Taj Houghton. And he was on track to be a top 5 pick contender. So there's a lot to like about his long-term projection. It just might not happen in 2025 as much as some of the other draftees. He's aware of that too.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, he could have been top 5 if not for that injury. So a great-looking prospect there. Bid City, where do the bids land for academy and father-son prospects? We know, obviously, Levi Ashcroft and Sam Marshall, they're heading to Brisbane. Isaac Kako will get to Essendon, Leo Lombard at Gold Coast, the Camporeales at Carlton as well. So there's plenty of them. Where do the bids land for them, though, Kel?
Well, nobody is expecting Richmond to bid on Ashcroft at 1. I think that'd be an absolute shock if that happened at this point. North, if they hold at pick 2, is a chance, as are Carlton at pick 3. There is a situation where he gets through to Melbourne at pick 5. I think that would be as far as it gets. But he's essentially, got that that long-term commitment with the Lions, like his brother Will signed on before he actually joined the footy club. So there's a 3-year deal, likely have an extra couple of years to that as well. So he's going to the Lions. Everyone knows he's going to the Lions. We're all absolutely aware of that. So it's just about a matter of who keeps them most accountable.
Yep.
I think it's somewhere between probably 2, 3 and 4, the most likely options there. Leo Lombard, Isaac Kako. I think the earliest the bids come for these two are at St Kilda's selections. Richmond at pick 10 and 11, maybe a chance as well for both of those guys. Both been right in the realm of that sort of selection across this year. So particularly the Tigers have done their work on Kako throughout the year, and they might go for a small forward at one of their spots.
Yeah.
The Bombers will match that. They've done the work to be able to do that. Sam Marshall obviously will join the Lions as well, another member of their academy production line, and this is the game, the grand final where he was best on ground. Levi Ashcroft was second best on ground. It was a pretty good day for the Brisbane Lions. I think later that day they went and beat Geelong in the prelim final as well. Somewhere a bid on the 20s, I think, for Sam Marshall. Sydney's been linked as a potential bidder for him.
First round, do you reckon?
Yeah, I think 19, 22, whatever that turns out to be after the bids, would be around that mark for him. Ben Campriali, some clubs think it happens just before the Blues pick 38. Others think just behind that. Much of a muchness, I think, in the end. Not sure if Tyler Welsh gets a bid or the Crows just grab him with their last national pick. Yep. Same for Lucas Campriali. They could just do that. The Blues with their last national pick. River Stevens likely to get a rookie selection, I think, to the Roos. So there's a few of the players with ties.
We love father-sons and academy players here on Gettable. Big signatures, the contract calls facing the 2019 draft class, because this is interesting, Cal, because there's a whole lot of these players who are going into 2025 seasons where they're out of contract and looking at either extending another 2 years, which would take them through to free agency, or potentially being on the move.
Yeah, 6 and out or 6 and in for these guys. This is the decision they've got to make. And look, the most obvious option for most of these guys would be to do 6 and another 2 to get them through to free agency. That's been the way that most of these clubs and their agents and players have played this along the way. A lot of the 2019 group already is actually signed through to free agency in 2027, like Caleb Sarong, Keziah Pickett. That won't stop the noise about Keziah Pickett next year, but Cody Waitman, Noah Anderson, Tom Green as well, already signed through there. Some of the big ones coming out of contract next year include Miles Bergman, who we've spoken about already in recent weeks. He's going to have plenty of takers again next year. Port Adelaide will be looking to lock him in as soon as they can.
Definitely.
Sam De Koning, who had zero intention of leaving the Cats in its most recent off-season, despite his name being raised. Geelong likewise had no interest in fielding any offers for him, but he'll be looking to lock in that permanent spot again, having been a premiership defender for the Cats a couple of years ago. So there's a couple. Brody Kemp too also had that St Kilda interest. What does that mean for how he plays his 2025? And Matt Rowell as well is the number 1 pick, obviously, from the 2019 pool. So there's a few of the names who are out of contract next year from that 2019 pool. I reckon Collingwood will have a crack at luring Matt Rowell next year. So they'll continue to be proactive on the trade.
Collingwood will?
I think they will. Yep.
Wow. Rowell and Dacos would be nice together, wouldn't it?
Well,
Bit of inside out.
No, and that's not saying that he will take up any interest or move at all. But as will other Victorian clubs, Collingwood will have a dip at, I think, a lot of players next year, and that'll be proactive in their approach. We've heard Craig McRae speak about this, and that's his sense of things, to go for the players rather than the picks. They'll have to be doing some manoeuvring with their picks. But the Suns will want to sign him up as soon as they can. Obviously, they did his last deal in the pre-season leading into his contract year before he came out of contract. So they'll be hoping to sew him up. But other clubs will be watching that closely until he does. But a lot of takers there for Matt Rowell, and as there will be for the Suns to keep him as well. The Suns clearly are used to this situation with their players.
Yeah, they are. Pick swaps. Will any clubs make deals before the deadline, Cal?
Deadline is 5 p.m. this Friday on November 8th. I don't think there's going to be any pick swaps before then. I think I'd be surprised if any clubs did that.
There generally isn't, is there? Clubs generally wait. There might be 1 or 2 in between trade period and the deadline, but clubs generally wait until the 9th.
Lots of talks that don't often amount to much. North Melbourne's number 2 is still the big pick in play, and it's still up for grabs big time. It would take a change of heart for Richmond to make a play for it now. that I don't think the Tigers are moving anywhere with their multiple picks. The one I am keeping an eye out for, though, is whether there's any swap or potential of swap between pick 2 and pick 4. Adelaide pick 4, do they try and get up a couple of spots to bank on the best midfielder that they can? Do the Roos push back a couple of spots, knowing that Alex Taru, for instance, could be available there without any sort of sense that he could be taken before then? There's a bit of a risk-free move if they do want to get Alex Taru at that point, the Roos. So that's one that I'll be keeping an eye on.
What do you think the trading piece is there?
Well, Adelaide don't have heaps in the future. They don't have anything this year to give. So it depends how far North would actually be willing to go back, really. As we've been saying since the trade period, Essendon secured a West Coast, North Melbourne, Gold Coast, all looking at ways to buy back into the first round using their future first-round picks. On the night, it's going to be hard, though.
Yeah. And Draft Smokey. Who are the late draft options catching interest? We love a bolter here, Kel.
Yeah, well, this is a guy, Hugh Boxall, who absolutely dominated the state combine for Western Australia. And dominated the year, really, in terms of his Claremont under-18 performances. Averaged 25 disposals there. A midfielder, he ran a 2-kilometre time trial, 6 minutes and 8 seconds. So 188 centimetres, can really move around the ground. Where he finishes up, we don't know just yet, but there are clubs looking at him as a potential top 40 or so selection. You know, a big, bustling midfielder who can move like that around the ground can be a bit of a roughie. Sam Toner is another one as well. Has clubs looking at him, meet him forward. Got a call up later in the year for Dandenong. Kicked a few goals at the end of the season as well before injury. So he's one that has been a bit of a bolter late in the year too.
All right, we love a bolter here. Plenty more still to come on Gettable. Stick around. Welcome back to Gettable. One of our favourite parts on this show is your unique take on life, Cal. Not just on the trade draft period, but on life.
Don't have much to offer there. I'm not sure you're being truthful.
No, we love it. And that's where this segment comes into things.
Yes, this is Kaleidoscope, where we see things through a different lens.
What's that?
That's a bit of Cobra Kai.
There we go. Cobra
Kai never dies. New season coming out soon as well, actually. Final season.
That's what I meant by loving Cal's unique take on
I actually do like Cobra Kai. I'm more of a Miguel man.
I don't know who any of those people are.
No, he's the hero. All right, so away from Cobra Kai, Kaleidoscope. We all love trade and free agency, right?
We do.
Clearly, we've got a show about it.
Yes.
And the best clubs in terms of their list management have traversed that path so well. So that they managed to pick up the best players to help them immediately. And every club looks at trade and free agents and says, that's the type of thing we want to do for our club. How can we get better in the short term and fix us up in certain areas, A, B and C. But for the supporters out there who thought their clubs were a bit quieter during the trade period or free agency period and heard their clubs talk about, we're going to take a draft focus, I just want to go through some numbers that suggest that sometimes that's the best policy and sometimes the best practice to actually find the best players. So let's look at the top 10 of the Brownlow medal this year, 2024. Only one of those players wasn't drafted by their club. 14 club best and fairest were won by players drafted by their club. Of the top 21 vote getters in the AFL Coaches Association Award, 17 were drafted by their club.
Yeah.
So the overwhelming number of players who were the best in the competition were drafted by their club. So we're talking about the likes of Caleb Sarong, a two-time best and fairest winner and an All-Australian by 23, who was number 8 pick in 2019 for Fremantle. Could he have done anything differently or better since he arrived at Fremantle?
Nope.
Absolutely not. And from year one, Rising Star winner, he was terrific. So he's a superstar already. We're talking about Hugh McCluggage, 182 gamer, premiership midfielder, a big game performer, 4-time All-Australian squad member, gun since he arrived at Brisbane at pick 3. They nailed that pick. We're talking about Zach Butters, Max Holmes, Patrick Cripps, Zach Merritt, Errol Goulden, John Newcombe, Andrew Brayshaw, Noah Anderson. We're talking about Nick Dacos. We're always talking about Nick Dacos on Gettable. A father-son, yes, but landed in the lap of Collingwood, no doubt. But the winner of the Coaches Association voting this year, second in the Brownlow, will be captain of Collingwood in a matter of time. So my kaleidoscope for this week, don't despair if the club takes a draft focus because this is actually where you find all the best players. The trade and free agency period, we love it. We love it. We hope you love it. But the draft period is where you actually do your best work.
Yeah. It's just the sugar hit, isn't it? It's the I get why trading clearly important, and we spoke about Brisbane winning the flag and how they'd had that solid mix of players they've traded into the club and players they've drafted from the outset. But it's the guys like Cam Rayner and Hugh McCluggage taking 5 or 6 years compared to the guys like Josh Dunkley who come in within 12 months. They've had an impact already.
Yeah.
It's whether or not we as a generation now can wait 5 or 6 years and be satisfied with that totally. But I completely agree with you, but it's just...
So Melbourne's Premiership 2021 started in 2013 when they drafted Christian Salem.
Yes.
Brisbane's 2024 Premiership probably started in 2015 when they got Eric Hipwood the next year with Berry and McCluggage as well. But it's pretty undeniable, those numbers. The
That's
Brownlow,
crazy. I didn't think that would be the case.
Best and Fairest and Coaches Association, basically all homegrown.
Yeah. Good point there, Cal. All right, plenty more still
Kaleidoscope
on Gettable. All right, welcome back to Gettable. We'll get to one of our favourite segments now. It is Askable. This is where you ask us the questions on our Instagram account at Gettable. Follow us there, ask your questions there. Askable is, of course, brought to you by Google Pixel as well.
I've got a question for you.
Oh, here we go.
Well, I just said I'm looking forward to Cobra Kai season finale. What's your Netflix
Do you know what?
at the moment?
Call me a nerd, Cal. I'm big into reading at the moment. I get into bed and just read for 3 hours.
How many episodes of that are there?
I'm actually reading Maxie's book at the moment.
Who stars in that?
I'm reading Glenn Maxwell's book. It's a great read. It's good.
The Big Show.
A good Victorian. Speak of the devil, Cal, not Glenn Maxwell, but Sam Toner, we spoke about him just before. He's written in, where does Noah Martens land?
Well, if he had played all year, this is why we love Gettable, because the players are watching. If he had played all year, I think he would have been inside the top 25 for sure, with those other impressive tools who are in that frame. And it is a draft where the tools have really risen up and changed the complexion of the whole pool. But the foot injury, the navicular injury, stopped that, of course. Combine was really good. I thought he ran well off not much training. GWS has shown a little bit of interest in him. They've got pick 21. Is that kind of the early point he comes into it? 198 centimetre key back who can run. They're pretty valuable all the way through.
And where does Jason go?
He's yours.
Angus wants to know, will the Viking play round 1 2025?
Well, like I've been saying all year about Alex Taru, what clubs are seeing in Alex Taru now is not what they're actually projecting to be in 2, 3, 5, 6, 8 years. So it's not the full picture. It's what he will become. So he could be round 1 debut, but that'll also rely on how he gets back through the pre-season from this back injury that he's got at the moment that he's been nursing in recent weeks. So I'd say it'll take until he gets to a club before they determine how he progresses throughout his pre-season. As he's spoken about on our show, he has had some injury things over the last couple of years. So I think he'd be pretty cautious wherever he lands so that they get him through that first pre-season. But he won't be daunted by the prospect of playing in round 1. I think he'll want it. So we wait and see.
Sort of depends on where he goes as well, doesn't it?
Yep.
Jacob wants to know, is there any chance of Jagger Smith or Finn O'Sullivan being on the board for the Saints at 7 and 8?
No, I don't think so. I've done a million scenarios. There's about 1 or 2 that spits out Smith or O'Sullivan to the Saints. So I think it's probably time to move on from that one.
You're one of those simulations that you've run the simulations and there is no chance it happens. All right, Luke wants to know, are there any gun mids left for the Dogs at number 17? They got 17, 25 and 35 post-draft. Who could they land at 17?
Yeah, it's a point of the draft where I think the communal view of the players would be that there's a lot of tools around that part of the draft, which clearly you wouldn't think would be high on the radar or priority list for the Dogs, given how well they've drafted the tools and been blessed with a couple of academy father-sons over recent years. So I think it's probably more looking at those midfield forward options around there. Taj Houghton's one we spoke about earlier. Yep. He could be around that mark. Cooper Hines is a midfielder forward. Would also be a player that I'd have around that point. Joe Berry as a small forward has a chance to be available. I don't think Xavier Lindsay gets through to that stage of the draft. Christian Moraes, though, is another who could be in that mix from 17 through to 30. He had a good carnival, particularly this game against South Australia, got his running game on, and he can do that. He's a runner, he kicks goals, he's done that across 2 years. When he's playing that role, that he fits really well, and he can read the ball well, read the game well, and get on the end of them. So he's one that could be sort of that sort of 15 to 35 point of the draft, and the Dogs have, as you say, 3 picks in there.
All right, Banksy, not that one, wants to know Jesse Detoli to Richmond.
How do you know which that one is?
With pick 20.
Do you know who it is, do you?
Can you imagine if Banksy just ended up being a draft fan? Jesse Detoli to Richmond with pick 20 was Banksy's question.
We need to get him on board. I like it. Yeah, I could see it in fixing in for sure. Like he's right around that part of draft. Sydney, North Melbourne, if they got back in, And North Melbourne, just on the Roos as well, have done work on a lot of players in the teens recently. So it makes you think that they are trying to get another pick back in. Yeah, so, and they've interviewed some players that are not going to be in contention for pick 2, 3, 4. They're not in contention for pick 62. So what are they doing in interviewing those players? So that's what makes you think about them either trying to split the pick, which we know is an option for them, but also use their future first to get back in. Just back to Tuohy, I see him as a good Richmond fit. If they want to add a guy who is a small forward who can start there but also play up in the midfield in time, I think he'd be a good mix for them.
Yep, I like it as well. Ed wants to know, who does Port have in its sights? They've got pick 13 now. It was the most wanted pick in the trade period. They've got it. Who do they grab with pick 13?
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? It's crazy. And look, they wanted it for a reason, and the reason being that it's still a very good part of the draft. They're in a prime position to land one of the best tall forwards in the draft if that's the way they want to go. I think they'd be open to seeing if a slider gets through, which they could still get one. You know, is Beau Allen going to get through? Is Murphy Reid, not that it'd be a slide there, but if it's Murphy Reid, you know, still too good to pass up at that point. Otherwise, there's a few key forwards that are going to have to take the fancy, I think, that are right in that realm. So Jack Whitlock, Jonty Ford, Jobe Shanahan. Jack Whitlock is one that would have to be right in contention. He just did some really good things across the course of the season, playing for Vic Country and also for the Murray Bushrangers. Kicked 25 goals in 12 games for the Bushrangers. Did well for Vic Country as well. Jonty Ford was a terrific player in the second half of the season. Kicked 27 goals from 11 games and for the Rebels, including a big 5-goal game against Oakley Chargers late in the season. So that was outstanding, that performance from him. He's tough. He knows how to sort of body players, and he was coming off a back injury that ruled him out of the first half of the season. So I think with some proper prep leading into his first AFL year, we could see him play it next year. And Jobe Shanahan's VFL form was really, really good for Essendon's VFL side, as well as his form for the Bendigo Pioneers across the season. You interviewed him recently, and he's got a good head on his shoulders as well. So I think those three, Matt Whitlock as well, obviously would have to be considered. Some clubs see him as a key back who plays forward. His goal tally suggests he can do just as well as either. But if I'm looking at Port, with Charlie Dixon retiring, I think a key forward coming through would be a good option.
No, I agree. All right, Matt wants to know, who will GWS be looking at drafting? Of course, they've now got 15, 16 and 21 post the trade and free agency period.
Yeah, I think they're a little bit like the Dogs in that where they are in the draft, I'd be looking at midfielders if they're there. I think that's probably the one area, and you know their list, but I don't look at their priorities or their depth chart. Where's their younger group of midfielders beyond the top liners?
And there's already, you don't want to say he's definitely going to leave, but there's going to be question marks that linger around Finn Callahan's future the entire way through 2025. So do you have to almost look at it as though, hey, is there a fallback option if Finn does ultimately leave the football club next year? But I agree with you in the sense that their best midfielders this year, probably Tom Green aside, were still Josh Kelly and those types that were a bit older towards the end of their career, you'd say. So, yeah, you look at the next batch of midfielders and do wonder whether or not that's an area they need to target.
There just isn't many midfielders in that part of the draft, I don't think. Jasper Alger is a half forward, and they, as you say, have these 3 picks early enough and then a 4th later on. He could be a little bit later on, but they have shown interest in him. He's nifty inside 50, wiry, good in the air, played some good footy for Vic Country and the Oakley Chargers as well this year. We know the Giants like their small forwards and are good at picking them as well. They've done their work on Joe Berry and Ollie Hannaford as well. Noah Martens, who we mentioned before, another type they've seen looked at from them as a key back. If Toby Travalia got through, I think they'd snap him up quick smart. I don't think he gets through there, though. I think he's somewhere between 8 and 14 most likely, but he's an option for them should he get there.
Linton, could Murphy Reid be available for the Eagles at pick 12?
Could the Eagles have the need for Reid again? Part 2. I've that as a real possibility, yeah. I think he would and should be looked at very closely by them at that point of the draft if he's available. I mean, he's so classy by hand. Some of the work he does creatively is the best in the draft, and he's going to be right around that point, I think. So I think he'd also be in the mix for Fremantle at 14 if he got there. The Eagles obviously wait and see if Beau Allen's available. I don't think the move back to 12 was specific to Beau Allen. They're still going to have a very good player there. And if it's Reid, if it's Houghton, if it's Beau Allen, if it's one of the talls, there's not much separating that group from maybe 4 or 5 selections earlier. So But going back to Lyndon's question, I think Reid should be in contention now and most likely would be available, or could be available. The Saints obviously would be an option for him earlier.
Yep. Jai wants to know names from key forward targets the Lions should look at next year.
What do you reckon?
As Joe Danaher replacements. Well, you know my thoughts on this in the sense that I think the way they've drafted and looked at the draft over the last couple of years suggests that they're going to back in that depth for them. So Logan Morris obviously had a massive impact this year, played in that premiership side. Luke Lloyd, who they re-signed through to 2026 a couple of weeks ago. Brendan Ryan, who they brought in on a 3-year deal from Hawthorn, still relatively young as well. So they've got the options there, but I look at it today, would they be a club that would monitor the Mitch Lewis situation in 2025? And I know he was never leaving Hawthorn this year, but his name was floated a couple of times by clubs. And we had a couple of questions in saying, would my club target Mitch Lewis? So I think they'd look at his recovery next year and wonder if he gets back in that Hawthorn side. Is a Shannon Neal from Geelong someone that's coming out of contract that could potentially be prized out of there? I mean, he's played some good footy this year. I actually quite liked him when he was in that team for the Cats, particularly late in the year. So is he another one that could be...
A couple of clubs actually came hard at him this year before he re-signed.
So there's those sort of questions that I think will be asked by Brisbane.
Or recommitted, sorry.
Yeah, it's one of those things where... obviously their salary cap's going to have a massive part in it. I mean, there's not many free agents that are key forwards coming out of contract in 2025. How crazy could they go in terms of targeting a contracted guy and bringing him to their football club? That's a question clearly they're going to have to ask themselves.
The other bit with Brisbane that's interesting is that, they've got academy boys this year. They've actually got another big hand of academy players next year. So it does limit your ability to keep picks and trade them off, or what you're going to do with them in terms of attracting those guys who aren't out of contract or aren't free agents. So Dan Annabelle being the main one at the Lions, potentially a top 5 pick as you head into next year. So that is something they'll have to consider for sure.
Certainly is. Well, on the Google Pixel, Cal, the Magic Editor feature lets you edit your photos right on your phone. So today we want to know if you could edit Sydney's best 22 and add one draftee to take them to another level in 2025. Who would it be? Of course, they've got picks 19 and 22.
Sam Lawler.
Yeah, he'd be a good one.
No, I mean, of the non-realistic ones, I think that Lawler, Harry Armstrong would be really good.
Anyone in that top 10.
But I look more at who's going to be potentially available or realistically a possibility. I think that one of the key forwards in a Whitlock, a Jonty Fall, I think Matt Whitlock is a player who can go both ends as well. Job Shanahan, I feel like one of those guys would be able to come in and make an impact next year. You'd probably think that that's an area that they could sort of add to in their terms of their younger key forward stocks and how many opportunities there could be for them. I mean, I'm not getting too drawn into the grand final.
You can't make management decisions off one game.
No, I mean you can be shaped by it, but in the end they've gotten pretty close and won a lot of footy games with that team. But I do think that if you can get a key forward with one of these 2 picks to help steer the next group of forwards, then that'd be a priority for them.
All right, Cal, another great show today, but plenty more still to come on Gettable. Of course, next week we're back on Wednesday, and then we have our Draft Week live show starting Monday, November 18, with Gettable's Draft Countdown show. We've got them on Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday. Coaches, player agents, recruiters, list managers, draftees, they're all coming on to speak to us. And then, of course, Wednesday night, the first night of the draft, we are live here for our Draft Night live show, analysing every pick as they happen. That'll be on both Wednesday and Thursday. And then the rookie draft, Cal, on Friday.
Well, that's the big one. No, I can't wait. It's going to be a great week.
It certainly will be.
It's going to be a great week. We've got a lot of guests lined up for that Draft Night Countdown shows, and it should be great.
They will be fantastic. Can't wait to see you there.
For all things W, we've got you covered. A cast of the game's biggest stars and experts discuss the top stories and headlines, plus in-depth analysis across the AFL W season. Join us each week for the W Show thanks to NAB on afl.com.au and the AFL Live app.